Hi, in this quick little project, we are going to take one of your self-portraits and turn it into something that's just a little bit wacky. We are going to rearrange the parts of your face. So we will start by choosing a self-portrait to use. So this, of course, is my self-portrait. Just kidding. That's my son, so I will use his cute little face. This photo makes me laugh, and that's why I'm using it. Okay, so go ahead and choose your self-portrait from the self-portrait project. Then your next step is to create the document in Photoshop. So go to File and New if you already have Photoshop open, or you can create new on that opening splash screen. The size of the document will be 5 inches for the width, 7 for the height. Orientation is portrait versus landscape. So portrait orientation, 5 inches wide, 7 inches tall, color mode RGB. Hit create. Okay, the next thing we need to do is place our photo into the document. So we'll go to File and we'll do Place Linked. Navigate to where your photo is, place that in there. And there's my photo. So I need to resize it. Your face should cover most of that document that we just created. Again, we're working in the document that we just created, that 5x7 image. Okay, so I'm just going to pull out from a corner. Depending on what version of Photoshop you use, the newest versions you do not need to hold down Shift as you pull from a corner to resize an image. It's one of the biggest changes that I've had to get used to, and I still try to do it the wrong way sometimes, especially when jumping from one version of Photoshop to another. So if you are working on the older versions of Photoshop before 2019, then make sure you press and hold Shift as you pull from a corner in order to prevent distortion of your image. Okay, the next thing we need to do is we need to mask our background. So we've done that before, but we haven't really done it for a while. So we need to have a quick review on that. We are going to get rid of the background, but I don't want to come in and just erase it, because if I don't do a good job of erasing the background to start, then I run into problems. So if I erase the top of his head, then it's gone. And that's not a big deal if you just did that. Like, obviously that's pretty noticeable, and I could go back in and correct that right away. But if I did it 50 steps ago, and then I'm working forward and I didn't notice it until this point, then I would have trouble going back and fixing that. So we are going to create a layer mask. So as you can see here at the bottom of my layers panel, this add layer mask button, I have moused over it right now. That's what we're going to use. And you can create your mask in a few different ways. So what you could do is you could start by creating a selection using one of your selection tools. I have the magnetic lasso tool right here. So I can make that selection, doing a pretty good job of following along with the contour of his face and hair and everything else. Can make my selection that way. It did a decent job. I'd come back in and fix it just using the regular lasso tool. I could add to my selection using this option here, subtract from my selection using that one. I want to actually add to my selection. Remember, we used these when we were working on our selection tool worksheet, and we used them a couple of other times in our Collage About You project we did, as well as in the Fixing Flaws project we did a little bit too. So I'll do as good of a job as I can making my selection. That's decent right there, not perfect, not terrible. So I made a selection, and now I'm just going to hit this add layer mask button, and it masks out around him. And I could have actually probably feathered in that selection that I made just a little bit. That is one way to mask out the background. It's not the only way. The other way that I use kind of a lot, and I don't know why I default back to this one, but I kind of do, is let me get rid of that mask for now. I add a mask, and then I just use my paintbrush tool. And remember, the saying goes, black to conceal, white to reveal. So I use black paint and just kind of paint over. So I can just go through and quickly mask out the background. And again, those two methods aren't even the only methods that you can use. So there's all sorts of different methods out there available. It kind of Depends on what you feel most comfortable with. And these tools all change very frequently, so the options for them change. Sorry, I just wanted to go through and do that real quick. I'm going to go back to where I was with my previous mask. There he is. I just stepped backward. Okay, so I'm just going to clean up my mask a little bit. Remember, if you're editing the mask, you want to make sure you're working on the mask, and I can tell that because it has that white outline around the mask. Oops, I see I got a little wild there with my masking. I'm going to undo that, come back in, and just clean it up. It would help if I use the right side of my pen. Okay, there we go. I did a decent job of masking. It's not perfect, but it's not terrible. Okay, my next step is I want to sort of temporarily sort of merge these two parts of my layer together. So I want to merge the mask with the image part of my layer. So I'm going to right click over here around the layer name, and I will convert it to Smart Object. And now those two are sort of merged together. I can still edit the contents if I want to, though, which is the nice thing about converting it to a Smart Object. Okay, my next step then is to create some guides. So I want to create some horizontal guides. So I will come up here to View and New Guide. I want horizontal guides. My first one is going to be at 1.75 inches, or sorry, 1.5 inches. There's one. Okay, and the way I have my document set up so that my image covers most of my document, but there's still some blank space. Those guides are pretty good for me. If you were to have your image cover the entire document, the entire canvas, then you might want to put in another guide, 1.25 inches away from the previous guide. So if I had to put one up here above this first one, I could put one at, it would be at actually 0.25 inches, which would be kind of weird. Or down here, I could go 1.25 inches away from 5.25. So that would be at 6.5. So it's up to you. If you fill up the entire space with your image, then add yourself another guide. But I'll show you the reason why we're making those guides right now. We are going to make selections. So we're going to select different chunks of this image and kind of separate them from the other parts of that image. So we'll use our rectangular marquee tool. We're going to choose fixed size up here in the options bar. So again, rectangular marquee tool, I have this first option selected, so that's just new selection. And then my width should be 5 inches. My height should be 1.25 inches. And again, I'll show you right now what I'm going to do. So I'm going to click out to the side here, and you notice that my selection was created. It wasn't in exactly the right spot, so I dragged it down, and now the bottom of my selection almost matches up with my smart guide, or my guide. It's a guide, not a smart guide. To nudge that down, I can just use the down arrow. So there it go. There it is. It's in the right spot now. The bottom of that selection is right on that first guide. I'm selecting this image layer, that's the active layer. I'm going to hit Control C to copy it, make a new layer, just hit that new layer button, and Control V to paste it. So I actually made 2 layers there. I'm going to go to the next chunk, but first I need to select my image layer again. That's super important. It's going to give you an error message if you don't do that. But now I'm selecting that area between that next set of guides. Control C, create a new layer, Control V to paste. So I have that part, the two top parts of my image copied into separate little chunks. I'll keep moving down to the next one. So Control C, Control V as in Victor. Move on down to the next one. Again, make sure that you click on that layer right there. Use my rectangular marquee and click in there. Again, Control C as in copy, Control V as in paste or Victor. Okay, and then we have one more chunk that we need to make. Make the selection from that layer, new layer, Control, whoops, I forgot Control C. So Control C, new layer, Control V, and there we go. So if I turn off the visibility of my original layer, I have all of those layers there. They're not lined up perfectly, but I'll fix that. So you can go ahead and get everything all lined up nice. If you want to take a look at it and make sure that you didn't miss anything, you can skip this step, honestly, because we're actually going to sort of rearrange the face anyway. That layer did not want to move for some reason. It was like stuck. Okay, so now at this point you can turn off your guides if you made all of your selections okay. So view and clear guides. And now you can't tell because he's lined up pretty well. I can tell a little bit, I guess, down here. But now we're going to nudge these chunks around. So I'll go to, I just right click and select a layer, or you can click on that layer in the layers panel. So, but I selected this one right here. I'm going to nudge it over to the side a little bit. That next one actually can stay where it is. Then I'll go to the next one up and pull this one to the side. And then that one, I'll maybe leave it there, or I can pull it even farther over. Okay, so what we're creating is sort of a Picasso-esque self-portrait, a little bit, maybe a nod to Picasso. It's not necessarily super Picasso-esque, but maybe just a little bit. My last step is to create something in the background. So that can be a gradient, it can be a solid color, it can be whatever you want. So go ahead and create a new layer. That's what I just did, is I went down to the bottom of all my layers and made a new layer down there. If your new layer appeared at the top, if my layer appeared at the top here, I could just click and drag that down below all of my other image layers. Or I could hit Control and the left bracket key on my keyboard to move it down, Control and the right bracket key to move it up. So I'm hitting Control and the right bracket key right now to move it up, Control and the left bracket key to move it down. Okay, so anyway, that's my new blank layer that I can rearrange however I want, right? So my new blank layer, I will fill it with a color. It can be any color you want, or like I said, you can create a gradient and fill it in with a gradient if you want. So I just selected my paint bucket, changed my color swatch, and now working on that new blank layer, I'm going to click somewhere, anywhere. Okay, so that's how I make just a solid fill color. If I wanted to, I can click and hold on my paint bucket to get to my gradient tool, and I have lots of options built into my gradient right there, so I could choose one of those, or I could come in and I could select my own color. So I just double click on my little colors picker right there, choose that thing, change the color, and I could choose a different color over here. And this can be, and the reason why I'm not getting anything is the opacity is all the way down. The opacity must be down for this one too. There we go. It took a little figuring out, but I got it. And now I can just click and drag and create a gradient. If I want to do that way, I could click and drag out from the center, kind of like that, but I want to maybe pull my gradient over to the side a little bit more to add more of the lighter blue and less of the darker blue. There we go, something like that. Okay, so go ahead and create your, we'll call it Picasso-esque self-portrait. All right, good luck. Let me know if you have questions.